Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted the Skeleton Champion from the Legions of Nagash to a tabletop ready standard with contrast paints. It's our tabletop ready Skeleton Champion, all ready for battle, and in this video I'll show you step by step how I painted him. And here he is, all primed, and I've allowed him to thoroughly dry before we move on to the painting methods. And so to do the primer, I went for the Citadel Colour Wraithbone undercoat spray and assembled him with the plastic glue. And then I also used some Citadel white paint just to touch up areas where I missed or didn't do such a great job on that undercoat with the spray. We'll mostly be using contrast paints in the video, but also some layer paints, and I'll put links to everything we use in the description below. And the brush I use mostly is the Army Painter Wargamer character brush, but recently I've been using the Kolinsky No. 2 a lot, and that's a great brush if you can get it. Okay, the first paint is the Contrast Black Templar, and with every paint we use here, it's really important to give it a good shake. So really shake that paint around and get it mixed up. And then we're going to move on now and start painting all the black leather straps. And there's not many on this miniature. I've just quickly borrowed one of the Grave Guard for this stage, just to show you how we paint all the black leather straps here, because I didn't press record on the Skeleton Champion for this stage. But this will just show you how it's done. It's exactly the same and almost in the same position as well. And so I'm just getting plenty of paint on my brush. Not too much, because this is just such a thin bit. And I'm almost using this like a felt tip pen just to colour in all that section of black belt there, and trying to keep it as neat as possible and not go over the lines. And then the next paint we're going for is the Contrast Blood Angels Red, and this is going to be for all the material that you can see on the shield, and there's also going to be some on the miniature as well. And this Skeleton Champion's a great example for the Legions of Nagash, because he's got pretty much all the elements going on. He's got the horns, the wood, material, armour, all the bones. So this is a good example that you can use this guide to take it through every one of the fighters that's included in that Legions of Nagash set, except for the Necromancer. Now with this red, I'm being a bit more generous, so I'm putting quite a lot on my brush here for this section, because there's lots of folds and creases. So I'm loading my brush up with paint, and I'm starting and ending my brush strokes where I want most of that paint to build up. And then this is going to let it seep into the cracks and the creases of the material and give us a nice shadow. And you can see it really wants to go in there, but I just help it along by putting a blob of paint where I want most of it to build up, and then using my brush to push and pull that paint into the other sections. And then where it's on the raised areas where I want more of a highlight and I don't want it to pool, then I just move it away from there, use my brush to wick it up, and then push it into the different cracks and crevices and creases where I want that shadow to be. And you've got lots of time to work with this contrast paint once it goes on, so just push it where you want it to go, and then once it's in place, just leave it and trust that contrast paint to do its job, do the work for you, and then that's going to dry really nicely. And for areas where there's lots of creases, that paint's going to naturally run into it itself and fill up those areas, but you just got to guide it and make sure it goes where you want it to go, and then once it's in place, just leave it alone. And for those areas that are hard to get to, I'm just making sure I move the model and making it as easy as possible for me to get my brush in there. Right, now we're moving on to some ceramite white base paint, and any white base paint's going to be fine here. And ideally you want to use the same colour you used to undercoat, but I didn't have that, so I've just gone for the white. And this is just going to touch up those areas where I've gone over with the red onto the areas of bone that we're going to paint later on. And so I'm just being really careful, really checking to make sure it's all neat and tidy for the next stage. And while that's drying, I've gone for the Contrast Wildwood, and that's going to go on this wooden section of the shield. And I'm putting quite a lot of paint on my brush now. It's fully loaded, and then I'm pushing it into those creases and those cracks of the wood there first, and then you can see I'm running my brush down and almost twisting it as I go so that the paint pools into that area where it meets the material. And that's where we want a natural shadow to kind of happen, and also in all the grooves of the wood as well. So I'm going back and forth to the paint pot, putting quite a lot of paint on, and then pushing it, pulling it, and guiding it around where I want it to go. And if there's an area there's not enough, I go back to it like here and just push that paint in. And you can see I'm just using the tip to push it in, turn in the model, and then letting that paint do the work for me, and then we'll get some great shadow from this, but also the raised areas will be light enough to give an idea of a highlight. And that's what's so great about these contrast paints. It's pretty easy and straightforward, and the main thing really is just to be neat and tidy, keep within the lines, and if you do go over the lines and make a mistake, tidy them up before going on to the next stage, and then you can get some really nice effects quite quickly. And you can see this is almost in real time, and we're flying through this model. Our next paint is the Skeleton Horde, and no prizes for guessing where this is going to go. This is going to go on all the bones, the skull, the arms and legs, and any bones we can see. And here I've got that brush loaded up, and I'm starting with the eyes and the deeper recesses, and I'm pushing as much paint as I can get in there to really fill it up. And this Skeleton Horde, it dries quite pale, so it's quite a light colour, but if you can get enough into the recesses, it still gives you a really nice shadow, so you can get away with one coat of this, just as we've done with the other paints. But it won't be as rich as, say, that Wildwood, which is a nice dark colour. But it's perfect for bones like this, and a real great effect. And from one coat, we're just going to get everything we need from this paint. It's the same principle. Get the paint on the brush, start and end where you want most of the paint to build up, push it and pull it into the recesses, and just keep it as neat and tidy as you can, going back with that white paint just to touch up areas that have overlapped before moving on to the next stage. And if you stick to those like simple kind of rules, then you can get some really nice effects from contrast paint. And for an army like this where you've got a lot of fighters, and if you want to get it through it quite quickly like I do, then this is just the perfect way to do it. And for this warband, I kind of went with the idea they were dry and dusty. The earth they're going to be on is called crusty, and they're on a blood-soaked battlefield that has dried up over thousands of years, and these kind of skeleton army have been brought to life, and they're emerging from that crusty earth, so they're going to be covered in dust, which we'll kind of use a dry brush effect for later on to dirty them up a bit, because this red you can see is quite bright. So I've just used those keywords like crusty, dry, dusty, and then I'm applying that to the miniatures and thinking about that as I go through this whole painting kind of technique. And although it's nice and simple, once we put a dry brush over this, it'll really tie us into those keywords. Okay, now it's time for the metalwork. So we're going to get some lead belcher, and we're going to give one nice thick coat of this over all the metalwork. And now I'm being extra careful not to go over the areas I've already painted with contrast paint. I mean, if you find you do go over those areas, you can certainly just take that white again, touch up the areas you've gone over, let it dry, and then put some more contrast paint back on it. But I find just be as careful as you can, because once that contrast paint has set, you can get some nice tones, and if you have to go over it again, sometimes you can see where the kind of colours have overlapped by using two coats. So yeah, just be really careful. And so for this model, it's going to be a tabletop ready standard. So the idea is to get these ready quite quickly, but I'm never rushing what I'm doing. I'm still being really neat and tidy, but the techniques themselves are simple and quite quick. But as long as you're nice and neat with them, I think you can get something that looks really fun and good on the battlefield. And you kind of don't have to go through all the stages of doing different layers, highlights, shades. You can just use these paints, one coat each. And as we're going to do later on, a little bit of dry brushing and some technical paints as well. And we can get some real cool effects really quickly and easily. So if you're just starting out painting miniatures like I am, I think these contrast paints are perfect because they kind of help build confidence, get some nice looking miniatures quickly. And I've got 26 warbands to paint, so I don't want to be hanging around because I want to get them on the battlefield, doing the battle reports with them all. And but I do want them to look as good as I can. So I'm just going to keep doing it really neat and tidy. And then take that same approach with the bases and create some cool bases that really set the models off. And then once you've done those bases, that really does transform the model and gives them a nice frame to work off. So combining some nice effects with the contrast paints and some nice solid bases, you get some really good tabletop ready miniatures. So here you can see now I'm just going over all that metalwork, and I've done most of it now, but there's quite a lot on this miniature. And I'm just going to be careful around this helmet area where the helmet meets the skull. But I'm not too worried about where it meets the horns there. I'm still going to take my time, but the chances are I'm going to go over it, especially if I want the metal to go right in contact with those horns. And also really careful here on these guards, the face guards. But once we've got this metal on and it's dried, we'll touch this up anyway before we paint the horns with contrast paint. But just be really careful here, especially on that face. Okay, now we're going with some Bugman's Glow, and I'm taking this very vegan makeup brush, and we're going to do some dry brushing. So these makeup brushes are perfect. They're so soft, and I'm just loading up the brush with paint there, working it into the bristles. So there's quite a bit of paint, but it's all working in, and then I take it across some kitchen roll and try and get rid of as much as I can so that brush is really dry. Now I'm going to use mostly downward strokes to go over all the red areas and a little bit of the wood, and I'm just going to give that a little dry brush, and this is going to make it look dusty. That's my idea here. So I'm not really highlighting it, I'm just trying to make it look a bit dusty, as if they've come out of that crusty dry earth, and they've got that dust all over their robes. And I'm not too worried if a little bit of this dry brush even goes on to the bones. I'm trying to avoid that, but if a little bit goes on, it's not going to matter. It's really going to tie it all in with the theme, and it'll also work with the bases later on too. So give that a nice dry brush, and then move on to the next one, which is Rakhath Flesh, another base paint, the same method. And I haven't cleaned my brush here. I'm just going straight into it, loading it up with this paint, working it in and off again. And I've chose these colours because they'll work with the base, but also because they're the paints I've got. So, I mean, a lot of the time you can either mix them yourself or just use what you have. And it just found that these two worked really well. And I'm just doing a little bit of a dry brush here. And again, it's not to really highlight it, but it's just to create that dusty effect. But it does give a little bit of a highlight here, but it's more important for the effect really. Okay, now we're going to take some technical paint called Typhus Corrosion and an old scruffy brush, just like this one here, and then I'm going to just put that on all the metalwork. So I'm kind of painting it on, and I just run my finger along the sharpest edge because I don't want too much there, because although these weapons have been in that dust and dry earth for probably hundreds, thousands of years, they're still going to be a bit sharp. So I'm just using my finger to rub that off those most raised areas. And I'm blobbing a bit on the top, making sure I get in all the armour as well, and covering all that metal with a little coat of that. And I'm almost stippling it on rather than painting it on. And this is going to make it look really old and grimy. So I used this on the Corvus Cabal when I painted them and for their weapons, and I really like the effect you get from it. And before that, I've tried on the terrain doing like rust effects and stippling. But this Typhus Corrosion, you can just put it on with one go like this, and you get some really nice effects and different colours. Okay, now we're going to take some ceramite white again, and I'm going to tidy up those horns that I made a mess of with the metal and the corrosion paint. And I'm just going to give that one coat. That's going to hide enough of it to cover that up, and then that'll make it nice and neat for us to put some contrast paint over in a little while. And again, being really careful, making sure I move the miniature rather than move myself, getting the brush to a nice point, and then just tidying up those areas there. And we're going to leave these horns dry completely before moving on to the contrast skeleton horde again, and we're going to paint these horns. And here I've loaded the brush with paint, and I'm starting at the bottom where I want most of that paint to build up, and then just work my way up to the tip. And I've gone back, and you see I just took the paint and just put a blob on, and it soaked down into that recess. So it went to where I wanted it to go almost on its own. And then I'll repeat that process on the back and the sides. So I rub most of the paint off my brush, and then that's going to all pool at the bottom, and then just flick my brush up so that it's going to be lighter at the top, darker at the bottom, with a nice dark line where the horns meet the metal. And then that's going to give us enough shade and enough highlight. And I'm putting a bit more on at the bottom, because don't forget this doesn't dry as dark as some of the other paints. So while it looks really dark here, once it dries it'll be paler. And I just use my finger just to rub a little bit of paint off the very tips, because they're going to be nice and bright. Okay, now we're going to go with some Stormhost silver layer paint. And I've got this soft brush here that's good for doing a dry brush effect in some areas that are harder to reach or smaller areas. And so just like we did before, I'm loading that brush up with paint and then working as much of it as I can off on the paper towel. And so here I'm just looking to give a little highlight to the edges of the metalwork. And I wanted to try something different than doing the edge highlighting. And I like with the dry brushing how it always comes across a bit dusty, and or at least when I do it, it comes across dusty. So I thought this would work well for the metal work and also give that a kind of nice age look. So it's not like pristine edges to the weapons. They haven't been up all night around the campfire sharpening them, but they've still got some sharpness on there. And we want a little bit of highlight so that that area catches the light once we're playing with them on the battlefield. But I don't want it to be too bright either. So I just thought this would work nicely, and I was interested to see how it would work really. And this is pretty much the final stage of the model, so I've been really careful now not to get this silver onto any other areas, so that's why this smaller brush is really good for that. There we go, there's our skeleton champion, all painted with mostly contrast paints to a tabletop battle ready standard. I'm really happy how it turned out, and it didn't take long at all to get all the warband done using this method. And here's a close-up of the base, so you can see how I did that. And I've made a separate video about how to make this blood-soaked wasteland base, so check that out if you want to have a go. And again, that's a nice quick technique using some Citadel technical paints that can get the bases done really quickly, but give us a nice blood-soaked earth effect. I'll put links to all the paints we use in this video in the description below, and there'll be affiliate links to Element Games, but they don't cost you anything extra. In fact, you could save up to 20% there at Element Games, and for every sale made through an affiliate link, I get a small commission, and that's going to help me develop the channel and create many more videos. So thanks so much for that support, I really appreciate it. I hope this video was helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know what you think in the comments section below. And look out for more videos coming for the different warriors and fighters from the Legions of Nagash. Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.